Picture a woman born beneath a blood-red eclipse, branded cursed from her very first breath. Cast aside by her own people, she survives on the margins, mending broken animals while her own heart carries old fractures, until the day invaders ride in and a warrior from a rival tribe recognizes what no one else ever did: her buried strength, her iron will, her undeniable worth. It is a story about love found when hope runs dry, about realizing that what others call a curse may be the sharpest gift a person can carry. If stories of grit, healing, and unexpected bonds speak to you, stay with us and share where you're listening from. Dawn crept over the desert in streaks of amber and rose stretching long shadows across the settlement as Elka dipped her bucket into the stream. Sage and juniper rode the cool air, a clean, grounding scent that granted her a brief calm before the day's trials took shape. 25 summers had passed since her birth under the red eclipse, yet the weight of that night still pressed at her throat like unseen stones. She studied her reflection trembling in the water, high cheekbones inherited from Hale. The father she barely remembered, eyes dark with too much solitude, hair falling like a raven's wing, threaded with a single feather she'd found at dawn. Beauty meant little when paired with a soul the world insisted was cursed. Upstream, women clustered in bright dresses against the dust-colored land, their voices dropping to murmurs the moment they noticed her. Children who'd been splashing were pulled close as if standing near her might spread bad luck. Elka had learned to rest inside those silences, the empty spaces fear carved out, turning them into room enough to breathe. Over the years, she built a sanctuary from isolation, a quiet fortress that kept her standing through rejection. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked on with practiced indifference, though every averted glance pricked like cactus spines. The moon shadow's coming, someone whispered not quite low enough. The phrase had followed her since childhood, a marker of her place as other. Let her pass, came the reply. Bodies shifting aside to form a hollow corridor, she crossed alone as always. In her small dwelling at the edge of Red Hollow, where canyon winds sang through stone, a wounded hawk lay in a basket she'd woven from reeds, gathered under the last full moon. Its wing was splinted with bark and rabbit sinew, bound with the same careful precision that marked all her work. The bird watched her with amber eyes free of judgment or superstition, only wild dignity and patient pain. Animals knew her truth. That was the strange gift her solitude had honed. They sensed the gentleness beneath her guarded shell, the steady heat in hands others refused to touch. They came to her broken and left mended, while she carried her own cracks in silence. "You'll fly again," she murmured, brushing its feathers with a light finger. The hawk blinked, a shared understanding passing without sound. The sky's waiting. No borders, no whispers chasing you. Her voice, rarely used with people, held a low music that eased the creature's hurt. On the wall hung her father's bow cedar, polished smooth sinew string, replaced each season with care. It was the lone inheritance from Hale, who had stood by her to his last breath. Unlike Mira, who slipped away in shame after the eclipse birth, her father held the line against the whispers, teaching Elka to walk proud, even as others shrank from her shadow. He taught her to loose arrows straight and true before fever took him when she was 12. His last promise stayed with her, that she would find her place, that the stars had plans for children born under eclipses. The bow remained her most sacred possession, though she seldom had cause to draw it. In private moments of early grief, she traced its curve, feeling close to the man who gave her not just life, but the nerve to keep living it. Beside the bow hung a small leather pouch with 3 arrowheads he'd shaped for her, obsidian flint bone, each a lesson. A keen mind, a sparked spirit, a body that endures. As the sun bled into crimson gold, then deepening purple, Elka sat cross-legged at her doorway, grinding herbs for a poultice. A mortar and pestle carved from riverstone moved in steady circles while she hummed a childhood tune about stars finding their place in the dark. Her song rose with the evening breeze notes dancing among the first lights overhead. She didn't notice distant horses turning their heads toward the sound, drawn to a harmony people had long ignored, the pull between earth and sky woven into every note. Above the fields, the harvest moon swelled, washing the rows of corn and squash in warm gold as families worked with thankful hands. Laughter drifted on the cooling air. Stories traded, songs passed down. Children darted between rows, gathering fallen kernels in small baskets, their voices fluttering like night birds. Elka worked alone in the far field, separated from the shared harvest by an invisible wall as solid as stone. The soil felt different here, drier, less forgiving, yet her basket filled all the same as she moved with quiet efficiency. Her fingers remembered the rhythm taught years ago, twisting each ear free with practiced care. The elders had assigned her this patch. The cursed must not touch the main crop, must not risk spoiling the season with their shadow. The moon stretched her shadow long across the furrows, a dark companion that lengthened and shrank with every step she took. In moments like this, Elka sometimes wondered if her shadow truly differed from the rest, if it lay heavier, darker, or carried something unseen, a mark only those hungry for fear could recognize. She had studied it countless nights, searching for proof of the curse others swore they saw, finding nothing more than the plain outline of a woman aching to belong. Her hands, rough and strong from years of surviving alone, worked without thought, while her mind drifted beyond the valley's rim. What waited in the northern mountains? Their ridgelines brushed with early snow that glimmered silver beneath the moon. Who lived there? Did they fear children born beneath eclipses as well, or did they read such births another way? In her dreams, Elka sometimes ran beside wolves through forests she had never walked, moving as part of a pack that accepted her without question. Those night visions felt less like dreams and more like memories, as if some piece of her spirit had already wandered where her body had yet to go. From a nearby juniper, a night bird cried out its lonely call, hanging in the air, like a question left unanswered. Elka paused, listening with the same careful attention she gave every living sound. The bird called again. She answered with a low whistle, shaping the tune as closely as she could. Silence followed, then the bird replied. Their quiet exchange continued as she returned to her harvesting. "You speak with the night creatures now." The sudden voice behind her made Elka start. Torin stood there, leaning heavily on his knotted walking stick, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit fields. Deep lines carved his face like dried riverbeds, proof of 90 hard summers under the desert sun. His eyes, clouded by age yet keen with judgment, measured her with a detached calm. "They speak to those who listen." Elka replied, her tone low, steady. She had learned long ago that fear and submission only fed the power others held over her. Torin made a non-committal sound, studying her nearly full basket with the practiced eye of a man who had overseen harvests for decades. "Your yield is strong," he said at last, reluctant approval in his voice. "The earth answers your hands," despite he left the words unfinished, the meaning floating between them like dust in moonlight. "Despite the curse you believe I carry," Elka finished, never looking up. "Maybe the earth remembers what people have forgotten." Silence stretched, long enough that she thought he had gone. When she finally glanced up, Torin was still there, his expression unreadable in the shifting dark. "The council has decided," he said flatly. "You will prepare the sacred herbs for winter stores. No one else will handle what you gather." Elka nodded, understanding what he did not say. Those remedies would be used only when all others failed. Like her, they would exist on the edge of necessity, acknowledged, yet never trusted. "I'll begin tomorrow," she said, her voice calm as still water, despite the familiar ache rising in her chest. "The waning moon is best for healing plants," Torin added, then hesitated. Something caught in his throat. For a fleeting moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. A man confronting a riddle that refused to solve itself, a healer whose hands restored life, yet who was believed to carry death's shadow. That contradiction had never troubled him before, Seeing it now unsettled her. The signs rarely lie, he muttered more to himself than to her, before turning back toward the distant fires where drums had begun to beat. Their rhythm rolled across the fields like a heartbeat she could hear, but never join. Elka watched him walk away, noticing how age had curved his spine and slowed his step. Once when she was very young, he had shown her how to tell healing plants from poison. A brief kindness before fear, silence his instinct to teach. She kept that memory the way she kept others, pressed flat in her mind, like dried flowers, fragile proof that she had not always been completely alone. Beneath the moon's steady gaze, she resumed her harvest, humming softly. The song Hale had taught her drifted with the night breeze, a tune about finding light in darkness, about stars revealed only after the sun fades. Her voice, seldom heard by people, carried a quiet beauty that stilled several night creatures in their paths. The melody lifted her loneliness upward, toward the stars, where perhaps someone somewhere might hear it and understand. She did not know that riders were already moving through the dark miles away, or that fate had grown weary of waiting. The attack came with first light. Elka woke to screams and the bitter bite of smoke, her eyes burning, her throat tight. Half asleep, she thought it must be a dream. Red Hollow had stood untouched for generations, shielded by canyon walls and careful watch, but the sounds pressing through her thin walls carried a sharp urgency. Dreams never held children crying in terror. Steel striking steel, and the raw shouts of men locked in violent struggle. She tore free of her woven blanket and lunged for the doorway, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, the settlement had erupted into madness. Shadowed riders poured through Red Hollow like a black-tide, faces streaked with war paint weapons, raised with ruthless intent. They moved with cold precision, striking the food stores and larger homes' first hooves, pounding up dust that mixed with smoke, until the village blurred into a shifting veil of menace. Near the center, a handful of warriors tried to rally, but they were caught unready. Some barehanded, others barely awake. Elka watched in horror as one fell beneath a club from the Black Spur gang, blood blooming across his chest. Her body reacted before her thoughts could follow. Her hands flew to Hale's bow and the quiver she had crafted during long, empty nights. Each arrow fletched with feathers, taken from birds. She had healed and released hawks, eagles, ravens, sky creatures that had briefly shared her path. She had always believed those feathers guided her shots, though she never dared say it aloud, unwilling to feed the list of accusations already tied to her name. The bow's weight settled into her grasp like a living thing. She swung the quiver onto her back, natural as breath, steady as a heartbeat. The smooth cedar, shaped by her father's hands and worn by her own, seemed to thrum with memory, anchoring her to the man who taught her to stand straight when others tried to bend her. "Run to the old cellar," she shouted at the Creek kids frozen near the meeting house, their faces smeared with dust and tears. They turned toward her voice, as one, the outcast, suddenly their only hope. Fear of the riders drowned out fear of her shadow. Without hesitation, they obeyed, scattering toward the hidden underground store beneath fallen logs at the forest's edge, a place Elka knew well from years of wandering alone. She waited until the last small body vanished, then shifted her focus back to the attackers. Her eyes tracked movement, searching for rhythm inside the chaos. These men weren't hunting lives, they were hunting plunder, rounding up horses and grain, letting fleeing Red Hollow folks scatter. It offered little comfort to the wounded, but it told her something. Elka slipped behind a broad boulder that gave cover and a clear view, set an arrow, and studied the scene. The raiders were still fixed on the granaries and pens, unaware of the children escaping. She drew in a breath. The world slowed. As the string tightened, Hale's voice murmured in her mind, "Breathe with the land. Match your heart to theirs. Don't aim where they stand. Aim where they're going." Her first arrow struck a rider's shoulder as he reached for a young woman with a baby bound to her chest. He screamed and let go, and she fled toward the canyon paths. The second arrow buried itself in the thigh of another man, pinning an elder against the medicine lodge wall. The third hit a warrior's hand just as he raised a torch, sending the flame tumbling into the dirt, where it hissed and died. Every shot was placed to stop, not to kill. Elka knew too well what death meant, how final it was from years spent mending broken creatures. Even these men deserved the chance to choose a different road tomorrow. But a fourth rider, a massive brute, wearing a rattling claw necklace, spotted her. His eyes burned beneath the paint as they locked onto her position. His bay stallion lunged forward, white fetlocks flashing as it devoured the distance. She barely had time to reach for another arrow before he was on her. The spear shaft slammed into her, throwing her hard to the ground. Blood filled her mouth. Stars burst behind her eyes. Her bow skidded across stone, stopping just beyond reach. The blow had crushed the air from her lungs, leaving her gasping helpless. As the man raised his stone-studded club for the killing strike, Elka stared up without blinking. If this was the end, she would face it the way Hale taught her. Eyes open, spine unbroken. She would not give him fear. She closed her eyes, waiting for the blow that would free her from the life branded as a curse. Instead, a sharp whistle sliced the air like a diving hawk, followed by a heavy thud and a choked cry. When Elka opened her eyes, the attacker lay beside her, a bone-handled knife buried in his upper arm. The club had slipped from his fingers, landing harmlessly inches from her head. Beyond the fallen man, a tall figure stepped from the shadows, moving with the silent certainty of a mountain-given flesh. Dazed Elka wondered if she had crossed into the spirit world, if death had come wearing another shape, but the pain pulsing through her body and the metallic taste of blood told her she was still firmly bound to the living earth. He advanced with the smooth, unhurried grace of a mountain lion. Each step measured, yet effortless, as he crossed the ground between them. Morning light caught the markings on his bare forearms. Not the wild paint of the Black Spur gang, but permanent lines cut into skin, symbols of rank and lineage, of bonds to ancestors and the land itself. Similar designs ran along his buckskin leggings, worked with dyed quills and tiny beads that flashed softly with every movement. Elka dragged herself backward, still gripping her bow, her vision wavering from the blow. Warm blood slid from the corner of her mouth, its iron taste a sharp reminder of how close she had come to slipping into the Shadowlands. Each breath sent a spike of pain through her ribs. Whether they were bruised or broken, she couldn't yet tell. Years spent tending injured animals had taught her to measure pain with cool distance, even when the wounded body was her own. The stranger's face stayed half hidden beneath a hood of raven feathers, each plume set with care to cast his features in shadow. But his eyes, dark, polished, intent, held her fast. There was no frenzy in that gaze, no blind hunger for blood, only a calm assessment that unsettled her more than rage would have. His attention swept over her in silence. The loosened braid, the white-knuckled grip on the bow, the stubborn set of her jaw. "You fight well," he said at last, his voice low and steady as river stone carrying the cadence of the mountain tribes. "For one who bleeds." Behind him more figures emerged from the thinning mist, warriors dressed like him, though without the feathered mantle that marked him apart. They spread through the village with practiced speed, binding the remaining raiders in rawhide, their coordination precise and purposeful. Elka forced herself upright, ignoring the wave of dizziness that threatened to pull her down again. She would not show weakness to this stranger, this unknown force whose intentions were as veiled as his face. Her fingers tightened around Hale's bow, drawing strength from its familiar curve. "The children," she rasped, pointing toward the hidden cellar. "No more riders," he cut in, gesturing behind him as his men secured the last of the wounded attackers. "My warriors have sealed the perimeter." His tone never rose. "The children are safe. We found their hiding place and set guards." Only then did it sink in. These men were not part of the attack. They were something else entirely. The markings, the feathered gear, the weapons shaped for mountain war. These were Ronan's riders, warriors from the high country, a people the Red Hollow folk had kept at arm's length for generations. Their lands brushed against each other during hunts, but true dealings were rare, limited to cautious trades or distant ceremonies. "Why are you here?" Elka demanded, wiping blood from her lip with the back of her hand, hissing as the split skin burned. She scanned the village. The Black Spur gang lay subdued. The Red Hollow folk were creeping from their shelters, relief and fear tangled on their faces as they took in these unexpected saviors. The tall warrior didn't answer right away. His gaze moved from her face to the bow in her hands, then to the men she had dropped with uncanny precision. 3 attackers down, 3 arrows, each shot placed to disable, not kill, an accomplishment that would have earned respect even among the best hunters of his own people. Something flickered across his features. Surprise. Recognition. "I'm Ronan," he said instead, lifting the feathered hood. The light revealed a face carved with striking balance, a thin scar tracing from temple to mouth, more mark of experience than flaw. His black hair was braided tight silver beads, catching the sun. "And you belong to no one here." It wasn't a challenge. It was a statement. The certainty in it rocked her as if he'd looked straight through her skin and into the hollow places she kept sealed. How could he know? How could he see the isolation that had shaped her since birth? "I belong to myself," Elka said, straightening despite the pain. Pride had been her last companion when all others turned away. She would not surrender it now. A faint smile touched Ronan's mouth, softening the hard lines of his warrior's bearing. "Yes," he said, simply, then quieter, heavier. "You are your own, and you are also mine now." The claim struck her dumb. No one had ever claimed her, not openly, not without shame. Even those who sought her healing did so in secret, clinging to the lie that she stood apart. Before she could answer, voices rose near the council lodge. The elders emerged, led by Torin. His staff lifted not in defense, but in greeting toward Ronan's riders. At his side walked Vea, her ancient face set in suspicion. Sharp eyes missing nothing, Ronan turned toward them. His stance shifting no longer, the lone predator but a leader among leaders. Yet before stepping away, he met Elka's gaze once more. The look he gave her carried a promise. Whatever had begun here in blood and chaos was far from finished. 10-year wounds, Archer," he said softly, pitching his voice so only she could hear. "Your aim is too valuable to risk with untreated injuries." With that, he drew his feathered hood back into place and turned toward the elders. Ronan's riders falling in behind him in a measured, respectful line. Elka watched him go, her thoughts struggling to keep pace with everything that had shattered and reformed since dawn. The attack, her sudden stand as defender, the arrival of these mountain warriors, and most unsettling of all the words of Ronan, who had looked at her as if he were seeing something no one else had ever cared to notice. By nightfall, the great council fire burned, low voices rising and fading in its wavering light. Elders of the Red Hollow folk sat opposite Ronan and 2 of his leaders, their faces lit by flame that cast more shadow than clarity. Elka remained on the edge as always, yet now and then the council's attention drifted toward her as the discussion deepened. "The Eclipse child saved our young ones," Torin admitted at last, the words dragged from him with effort. While others ran, she stood against the attackers. Ronan's face gave nothing away, but his eyes found Elka across the fire. "Eclipse child," he repeated, testing the phrase as if it were new to him. A female elder leaned forward. "Born when the moon ran red," Vea said sharply, "marked by spirits that walk between worlds." Her twisted finger pointed toward Elka, a bearer of misfortune. The silence that followed crackled with unseen tension. Then, unexpectedly, Ronan laughed, a low sound like distant thunder, warm and unafraid. "In my people's understanding," he said slowly, choosing each word with care, "a child born under an eclipse carries the strength of both sun and shadow." Such children are rare, and they are valuable. Confusion rippled through the elders. In Elka's chest something stirred, too fragile to call hope, but close to it, like the first green shoot breaking winter soil. "We came to propose alliance," said one of Ronan's companions, an older warrior with silver threaded through his braids. "The Black Spur gang will return with greater numbers by the next moon. Alone, neither of our peoples can withstand them." The council shifted to talk of borders, hunting grounds, shared defenses. Elka listened, though her thoughts clung to Ronan's words. Rare, valuable, not cursed, not broken. The idea that her life might mean something different beyond her tribe's fear felt like a door appearing where there had always been a wall. As the fire burned down, she became aware of Ronan watching her, not intrusively, but patiently, as though waiting for her to see what he already had. When their eyes met, he made a small gesture with his hand, mimicking an eagle in flight. Without thinking, Elka answered with the response Hale had taught her as a child, back before others were forbidden to play with her. Ronan's eyes widened a fraction, the corner of his mouth lifting in quiet satisfaction. They had found a language beyond words, beyond judgment and superstition. In that instant, something shifted, a bridge forming across differences deeper than tribe or land. Morning mist clung to the valley like a half-remembered dream as Elka sorted herbs inside her dwelling. Ashwing, the hawk she had nursed back to health, had taken flight at dawn, a small victory that left the space feeling emptier than before. Her hands worked on instinct, separating healing leaves from poisonous berries with practiced ease. A shadow crossed her doorway. She knew without looking it was Ronan. His presence carried weight like the air before a storm. "May I enter?" he asked, his deep voice formal, almost careful. Elka nodded, not pausing in her work. He ducked inside and settled nearby, watching her hands in silence. "Your knowledge of plants is extensive," he said after a while. "The unwanted have time to learn what others overlook," she replied, not bitter, simply honest. Ronan reached into a pouch at his belt and drew out a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. "In my village," he said, unfolding it to reveal a carved stone pendant. "There is a story about the first healer. She too was born during an eclipse." The carving showed a woman with arms lifted toward a darkened moon, stars scattered around her. The detail was precise, shaped with reverence. "Our medicine woman teaches that an eclipse does not steal the light," Ronan continued, holding the pendant in his open palm. "It reveals the stars that are always there, hidden by the sun. Sometimes we must step into shadow to see what truly shines." Elka's fingers stilled. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve a different story than the one you were given." His voice stayed even, but it rang with a truth her heart recognized. "The council has agreed to the alliance," he added. "I will remain here with several of my warriors," he said evenly, "while others return to bring more of our people." Elka absorbed the words, unsure what they were meant to change for her. Ronan closed his fingers around the pendant, then leaned forward and set it gently beside her sorting basket. "Perhaps nothing," he added. "Perhaps everything. The story isn't finished. It's still unfolding." He straightened to leave, then paused at the doorway. "The Creek kids are asking for you." She looked up. "They say the curse bearer has arrows that hunt only the wicked." A smile touched his eyes, though his mouth stayed serious. "Stories change, Elka. Sometimes all they need is someone brave enough to write a new ending." After he left, she stared at the pendant for a long while. Slowly, cautiously, she lifted it into her palm. Morning light caught its surface, and for a breath it seemed to burn warm against her skin. The alliance sent ripples through Red Hollow like stones dropped into still water. Families from the mountains arrived with their bundles, their customs, their different ways of seeing the world. Temporary shelters rose beside permanent homes, reshaping the village into something shared and unfamiliar. For the first time she could remember, Elka became visible in ways she hadn't chosen. Children once forbidden to approach her now brought small offerings, smooth stones, bright feathers, even a tiny turtle, tokens of gratitude for the night she stood between them and harm. The mountain healers sought her out to speak of roots and leaves, treating her as a fellow practitioner rather than an outcast. She wore Ronan's pendant beneath her clothes, its weight against her chest, a steady reminder that meaning could shift, that stories could be rewritten. On the 7th day after the alliance began, Ronan found her at the stream, where she gathered clay for poultices. "Walk with me," he said, not a command but an invitation. They followed the water upstream until it widened into a clear pool fed by a small fall. Sunlight scattered across the surface, flashing like brief diamonds. "My grandmother, Iria, would say, 'This place carries strong medicine,'" Ronan said, his voice low beneath the sound of water. Elka nodded. "I come here to listen when the village grows too loud." "And what does it tell you?" She considered before answering. "That everything changes, that nothing stays trapped forever." Ronan bent to lift a smooth stone, rolling it in his palm. "Some of your elders resist this joining," he said. "They fear blending our peoples will anger the spirits." "And you?" she asked. "What do you believe?" He skipped the stone across the pool. It touched 4 times before sinking. "I believe in watching for signs," he said, meeting her eyes, "and listening when they speak." His gaze held hers. "I believe the woman who defended children with her dead father's bow, who heals creatures others abandon, is medicine both our peoples need." The directness of it made her heart quicken. No one had ever looked at her like that, not as a symbol or a warning, but as a person fully seen. "There will be a council tonight," he continued. "The elders want to speak of how our traditions will live together. I want you there." Her surprise must have shown, because he added, "Not at the edges, Elka. At the center where your voice can be heard." Something tightened in her throat, fear and longing tangled together. "They won't listen to the eclipse, child." Ronan reached toward her, slowly giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed the outline of the pendant beneath her dress. "Then it may be time they meet the star revealer instead." That night, the council circle thrummed with tension as Elka took her place not at the periphery, but seated directly across from Torin. Her back was straight as a pine. She wore the pendant openly now, its polished surface catching firelight as her fingers touched it for steadiness. Ronan sat at her right, solid as stone. On her left sat Sola, the mountain medicine woman who had arrived days earlier. Her braids streaked with silver, her eyes sharp with understanding. "We speak tonight of joining paths." Torin began, his voice heavy with tradition. "Two rivers meeting must find a shared course or risk flooding all that stands." They spoke of hunting grounds, shared rights, the raising of children. Elka listened, noting how Ronan and his people spoke direct, respectful, confident, without arrogance. Then Vea lifted her hand. "There is the matter of the eclipse, child," she said, her voice thin but firm. "Her presence here breaks custom. Her influence may stain at this beginning." The silence that followed pressed hard. Elka felt the old shame rise, tightening her chest. Then Sola's weathered hand covered hers. "Among my people," Sola said gently, her voice carrying through the circle, "we judge a tree by its fruit, not by the shadow it casts at noon." Her fingers squeezed Elka's. "I have seen this young woman heal what others would leave to die. I have heard how she stood alone to protect children when warriors fled. These are not the acts of one who brings misfortune." Torin's brow furrowed. "Our traditions can blind as easily as they can guide," Ronan said, cutting in with calm authority. His voice held respect, but no retreat. "The Black Spur Gang will return before the next full moon. We will need every skilled hand, every brave heart." His gaze shifted deliberate to Elka, every healer. Something changed in the air, as if unseen threads were being drawn into a new design. Elka felt it settle around her shoulders. Drawing courage from Sola's steady touch and Ronan's unwavering presence, she spoke at last. I have lived my life on the edges, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. I accepted your judgment because I had no choice. She lifted her chin. But the earth bears my footsteps the same as yours. Rain falls on my skin as it does on yours. The moon, full or eclipsed, shines on all of us alike. Her fingers brushed the pendant at her throat. I offer my hands and my heart to this alliance, not as the cursed one, but as a daughter of this land who wants her people to live. The fire snapped in the silence that followed. Then slowly Torin nodded. Not full agreement, perhaps, but recognition of a truth he could no longer deny. As the council moved on, Elka felt Ronan's shoulder brush hers, a fleeting contact others would miss. Warmth spread through her, like honey in sunlight. The days that followed found a strange new rhythm. Each morning began as before, tending wounded creatures, gathering herbs, preparing medicines. But now there were visits. Mountain children curious about her work, and local youths no longer warned away from her door. Ronan's presence threaded through her hours like a deep red strand, sometimes seen, often only felt. He appeared while she worked, sometimes helping without words, other times asking questions that revealed a keen respect for her knowledge. Unlike those who once shunned her touch, he found reasons for it passing. Tools steadying her, over stone, once lifting a bird gently from her hair with careful fingers. One evening, when sunset washed the western sky in amber and rose, he brought her a gift. A leather satchel finely worked with patterns that echoed the pendant she now wore openly. For your healing supplies, he said. The symbols stand for balance, light, and shadow, sickness, and cure. It's beautiful, she said, simply the words, too small for what stirred beneath them. They sat together on a flat rock overlooking the valley, as darkness slowly claimed the land. Fireflies rose from the grasses, blinking like stars fallen to earth. In 3 days we complete the alliance ceremony, Ronan said, after a long, easy silence. After that, I must return briefly to my village to bring more of my people. Elka felt a sharp, unexpected ache. How long will you be gone? 4 days, maybe 5. He studied her profile in the fading light. Unless you wish to come with me. The offer hung between them. Elka had never left the valley, never crossed the invisible borders that had defined her life. She began then, faltered. You don't need to answer now, he said gently. Only know you would be welcome there, especially by my grandmother, Iria. They fell quiet again, but this silence was different, taut with possibility. After a while, Ronan reached for her hand, slowly giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers laced warmth, spiraling up her arm into her chest. They stayed like that as stars emerged overhead, their joined hands resting on stone, a bridge across difference, stronger than words. In that quiet language of touch, Elka heard truth she had waited her whole life to know. You are seen. You are valued. You belong. When he walked her back to her dwelling, the night seemed alive with promise. Futures unwritten yet suddenly possible. Preparations for the alliance filled the village. Temporary shelters spread across the eastern meadow. Hunters returned with deer and rabbit for the feast. Women from both peoples worked side by side, grinding corn, baking ceremonial breads, trading methods and laughter across old boundaries. Elka found herself drawn into it all. Young women who once avoided her now asked for medicinal teas. Children trailed her with endless questions about plants and animals. It felt fragile, like walking across ice that might crack, but each step that held built careful trust. On the eve of the ceremony, twilight settling like indigo silk over red hollow Torin appeared at her doorway. His face, carved by 90 years of sun, looked troubled in the fading light. May I enter? He asked, a formality that felt new. Elka nodded, setting aside the ceremonial pouch she had been decorating with quills and colored thread. She realized then that the pouch she was stitching was a gift she was making for Ronan, though she had not yet admitted that truth even to herself. Torin eased himself down onto a sitting mat, his joints answering the motion with quiet cracks of protest. For a long moment he simply studied her, dwelling, the bundles of drying herbs suspended from rafters, the orderly rows of clay jars filled with salves and tinctures, the small wooden figures Hale had carved for her when she was a child. "You have shaped beauty out of solitude," he said at last, surprise and something close to regret threading his voice. Elka waited, knowing this visit carried more weight than observation alone. "I have come to speak of the mountain warrior," Torrin continued, his deep-set eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her shift. "His interest in you has not gone unnoticed." Warmth crept up her neck. "Ronan respects my knowledge of healing," she said carefully. "He looks at you as a man looks at a woman." Torrin replied not unkindly, "Not as a teacher looks at a student." The bluntness stole her breath. "I must caution you, child. The acceptance you feel now is thin as spider silk. If you bind yourself to him, some will say your shadow falls on his people as well." A colder anger rose in Elka, sharp, controlled. "My shadow," she said quietly. "The one others have cast on me since birth." Torrin did not recoil. "The eclipse is not a human invention. The spirits marked your beginning. And what if those marks mean something different than what we believed?" She touched the pendant at her throat. "What if I was never cursed, only different?" His expression softened in a way she had never seen before. "I did not come to forbid," he said, "only to warn. Beliefs held for 25 years do not vanish like morning mist. There will be those who blame any future misfortune on this bond." For the first time she saw concern in his eyes rather than judgment. "I have lived with their fear all my life," she said gently. "Now I may also know something else alongside it." Torrin nodded as though her words confirmed a long-held thought. He reached into his pouch and drew out a small bundle wrapped in soft hide. "This belonged to your father," he said, setting it between them. "He asked me to give it to you when you found your path. I believe that time has come." With unsteady fingers, Elka unwrapped the gift, a bracelet of polished wooden beads and tiny ocean shells Hale had gathered in his youth. "He never believed you were cursed," Torrin said as he rose. "Perhaps he saw more clearly than the rest of us." After he left, Elka sat in the deepening dark, the bracelet cool in her palm, her thoughts scattering like autumn leaves. For the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped by choice rather than confinement, and the thought both frightened and thrilled her. Dawn broke clean and gold on the day of the alliance ceremony. Elka woke early, dreams still clinging to her, running water diverging paths, stars visible in daylight. She bathed in the stream, letting the chill wash away the remnants of her old life. Sola had given her a ceremonial dress of soft deerskin dyed deep earth brown and embroidered with symbols of healing and growth. Elka braided her hair, carefully weaving in red threads as Sola had taught her, signs of continuity and connection. Around her wrist she fastened her father's bracelet. At her throat, Ronan's pendant caught the light. Stepping outside, she joined the gathering. The ceremony took place in the central clearing where stones formed a circle around a newly dug fire pit. Two streams of people entered the red hollow folk from the east, Ronan's riders from the west, until they closed the circle together. Ronan stood opposite her, dressed in ceremonial attire that marked his standing among his people. Their eyes met across the space, and recognition struck her so strongly she nearly faltered, as if their spirits were finishing a conversation begun long ago. Torrin and Sola stepped forward, each carrying a torch. "Today, two peoples become one river," Torrin proclaimed. Two fires joined to make a stronger flame. They lit the central fire together. As it rose, members of both tribes offered symbols, herb bundles, carved prayers, tokens of shared memory. When Elka's turn came, she stepped forward without hesitation. From a small pouch, she withdrew a feather. From Ashwing the hawk she had healed and released. "May we find strength in healing," she said, clearly, laying the feather on the flames. "May we remember that wounds once mended can make us stronger where we were broken." The feather curled turned to ash and lifted skyward with the smoke. As she stepped back, Elka felt the pull of chaos fade, replaced by something unspoken that passed between them in a single look. A promise, an understanding, a future beginning to take shape from raw possibility. The ceremony flowed on, with songs from both traditions, shared food and drink, and children from each tribe laughing together in games that needed no translation. Throughout it all, Elka found herself included in ways she had never known. Women invited her into their circles. Elders inclined their heads as she passed. Children tugged at her hands to show her discoveries. When the sun climbed high, Ronan appeared at her side, his presence both steady and stirring. "Walk with me," he said, offering his hand. They slipped away to the quiet pool where they had spoken days before. There beside the dancing water, he took both her hands. "My people leave tomorrow to bring the rest of our village," he said. "I ask again, will you come with me?" Elka looked into his eyes and saw a life she had never dared imagine, one where her differences were strengths, where belonging came because of who she was. "Yes," she answered, scarcely above a whisper, yet clear as the current beside them. "I will come." The journey to Ronan's village carried her through landscapes she had only glimpsed from afar, wide valleys, brushed with wildflowers, forests thick with pine and aspen, rocky passes where eagles rode the warm air. Each new horizon widened her sense of the world and her place within it. They traveled with a small party, Ronan 3 warriors, and 2 families returning to gather their things. The children quickly claimed Elka as their favorite companion, showering her with questions about plants and offering stones or insects they found along the trail. On the second night, beneath a sky brighter than any she had known, Ronan found her sitting slightly apart, face tipped upward, in awe. "They feel close enough to touch here," she said as he sat beside her. "My grandmother, Iria, says the stars are the eyes of our ancestors," he replied, following her gaze. "When we die, we join them in watching." Elka smiled. "I like that better than what our shaman taught, that stars are distant fires meant to warn spirits away." "Different stories," he said, his shoulder brushing hers. "Same stars. Maybe all our differences are like that, different ways of seeing the same truth." The thought delighted her. In her own village, few had ever listened to her ideas. "Tell me about your grandmother," she asked. Ronan's face softened in the firelight. "She raised me after my parents died of fever. She's formidable, wise, sometimes terrifying." He chuckled. "But always fair. She's our storyteller, keeper of history and prophecy. Will she approve of me?" The question slipped out before Elka could stop it. His hand found hers in the dark. "She already does," he said simply. "Your reading of the stars is what sent me to your village. She said I'd find one who walks between worlds and that this person would matter to both our people's survival." Elka's breath caught. "You believe that's me, I know." "It is," Ronan said, certainty warming her more than the fire. "From the moment I saw you, defending children, with nothing but courage and a bow." They sat in companionable silence, hands linked, 2 separate lives flowing toward a shared future. Above them, the stars kept their ancient watch. On the morning of the 4th day, they crested a ridge, and Ronan's village appeared below, settled in a sheltered valley. Unlike the Pueblo-style homes of Red Hollow, these dwellings mixed sturdy wooden structures with traditional hogans arranged in a pattern Ronan said followed the sun's seasons. As they descended, Elka felt something unfamiliar, not the old dread of rejection, but a lightness, almost buoyant. For the first time she approached a new place, not as the curse-bearer, but simply as herself, a healer, a woman, a person of worth. Ronan squeezed her hand. "Welcome to my home," he said. His eyes added what words could not. "May it become yours too." The welcome feast lasted deep into the night, filled with dancing song and foods more varied than Elka had ever tasted. She watched how Ronan's people lived the easy laughter, the inclusive talk, children moving freely among adults. Most striking was how they received her, with curiosity instead of suspicion, with questions about her healing rather than fear of her birth. When Ronan presented her as the star revealer, the gathered red hollow folk inclined their heads as if the truth of it had always been known. Several fingers brushed the pendants at their own throats, shaped like the one resting against Elka's chest. As darkness thickened and the fires sank into glowing embers, a quiet expectancy settled over the circle. From the largest lodge, an elderly woman stepped forward, leaning on a cane carved with animals and winding lines. Though her back curved with age, her stride carried intent. Her silver hair was woven into careful braids, threaded with turquoise that caught the firelight. Grandmother Ronan said, rising and offering his arm. She took it with calm authority. So the old woman said, her voice firm despite the years you have returned with her, her eyes clear and sharp as cold spring water, locked onto Elka with an intensity that stole her breath. "Come closer, child," she said. "Let me see the one my grandson has chosen." Elka stepped forward, heart racing, and knelt with respect. The elder studied her face as if reading a long hidden map. "Yes," the woman murmured at last, nodding. "The stars spoke true. You carry shadow and light together." A weathered hand lifted, resting briefly over the pendant at Elka's throat. "Do you understand the sign that an eclipse does not destroy the light?" Elka answered steadily, repeating what Ronan had once taught her, but reveals what was always there, unseen. The elder smiled, well spoken. "But there is more." She motioned for Elka to sit beside her. "Tonight you will hear of the first healer," she said, her voice carrying as the people drew closer. "Then you will know why a birth under a blood moon is not a curse, but a summons." She told of ancient days when sickness swept through the people like flame through dry grass. Of a woman born during an eclipse who learned that plants feared as poison could in careful measure become medicine. That woman was shunned, then tolerated, and finally honored because she taught others to look past fear and see truth beneath. Since then, the elder set her gaze moving around the circle we have watched. For those born between light and shadow, they notice what others overlook. They heal what others refuse to touch. They walk paths between worlds. Her eyes returned to Elka. They are rare, they are precious, they are needed. When the story ended, the elder reached for a bundle wrapped in soft hide. "This has waited many generations," she said, unveiling a silver and turquoise bracelet that shimmered in the firelight. "It belongs to the one who will bind our people to their neighbors in a time of greatest need." With solemn care, she fastened it around Elka's wrist, opposite the simple wooden band carved long ago by Hale. Past and future balanced on either arm. "The circle is whole," the elder declared. "The promise stands." Later, as voices and laughter rose again, Ronan found Elka standing apart, tracing the bracelet's patterns. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, noticing the tears she had not let fall. "All my life," she whispered, "I thought I was born wrong, that my existence was something others had to endure." She looked up at him, wonder softening her face. "How can it be that here among people I once feared, I finally find the story that explains me?" Ronan cupped her cheek. "Not strangers," he said quietly. "Family." The word filled every empty space she had carried within her. Acceptance, belonging, love. Beneath the wide, star-splashed sky, as his lips met hers, Elka felt the broken pieces of herself knit together, not erasing the past, but shaping it into something stronger. 1 year passed, then another. United, the Allied people thrived where division would have destroyed them. When the Black Spur gang returned, they met a single force and were driven from the valley for good. Shared hunting grounds brought fuller harvests. Combined knowledge created better medicine. Blended traditions gave birth to richer ceremonies. Elka moved between both settlements, teaching and learning, easing old fears. The Creek kids followed her everywhere, calling her Star Woman as she gathered herbs or tended wounded animals. Even Vea, once her fiercest critic, eventually sought her help for aching joints. On the second anniversary of the alliance, beneath a swollen harvest moon, Ronan found Elka at their quiet pool. She sat with her feet in the water, watching ripples spread outward. "I've been looking for you," he said, sitting beside her. "I needed stillness," she replied. "To remember," he said, and she knew he understood. After a long silence, he spoke again. "My grandmother Iria asks if we are ready to complete the joining ceremony. She says time is precious and wishes to see it before she walks with the star ancestors." Elka smiled, thinking of the fierce old woman she loved dearly. "And what did you tell her?" "That I was waiting for the right moment." Ronan took Elka's hand, familiar, yet never casual. "I believe that moment is now." She turned and studied his face in the silver wash of moonlight, the familiar strength of his features, the steady eyes that had seen her clearly from the very start. "Are you certain?" she asked quietly. "There are still voices in both camps that whisper about the eclipse-born girl. Let them whisper." Ronan replied, his tone calm, assured, the kind of confidence she had grown to trust. "Our lives speak louder than rumors ever could." From a small pouch at his belt, he drew out an object that flashed softly under the moon. A ring, silver, bound with turquoise, set against a band of dark wood, she recognized instantly, cut from the same tree her father Hale once shaped into a bow. "I carry your heart with mine," Ronan said simply. "Always." Tears warmed Elka's cheeks as she held out her hand. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a shadow crept across the moon above them. The first bite of an eclipse, beginning its slow passage through the sky. They lifted their eyes together, watching as darkness eased over light, uncovering stars that had been hidden moments before. "Perfect timing," Ronan murmured, drawing her close. "Or maybe," Elka said softly, leaning into him, "we make our own timing now." Above them, the moon hovered between brightness and shadow, not an omen of harm or ill fate, but a living reflection of their path. What once set Elka apart was now honored. What once isolated her now tied her to something far greater than herself. As the eclipse deepened and the stars emerged in full brilliance, Elka and Ronan remained by the pool, their reflections blending on the water's surface, two lives folding into one shared story. Separate journeys, converging like quiet streams, joining a powerful river, reshaping the land as it moved toward unseen horizons. In that fragile balance of shadow and light, past and future, ending and beginning, Elka finally grasped the truth that had always lived beneath her life. Eclipses do not steal the light. They change how it is revealed, uncovering what ordinary brightness conceals. What had been named a curse was in truth her greatest gift, the power to stand between worlds, to see past surfaces, to heal what others feared to touch. And in Ronan's eyes, bright with starlight and unspoken vows, she saw the deepest truth of all. That love, like the rarest medicine, often arrives disguised as something else entirely, waiting for a heart brave enough to look deeper and recognize its true power. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and respect for original creative work.